After 9 years building my father's company, he handed it to my 25-year-old nephew. Months later, the empire was in ashes, and they begged me back. I've always considered myself to be a well-organized man. But now, I've begun to doubt everything. Let me set the situation for everyone. This all started during my father's 58th birthday celebration, and it seemed like my life was turned upside down in a moment. For reference, I've been working for my father's firm for the past 9 years. After 9 years of effort, working, and establishing the business, I believed I was set. I expected to inherit the firm one day, as any devoted family member would. After putting in the effort, it was a pretty enormous celebration. We had friends, relatives, business partners, you name it. My parents enjoy a good celebration, and today was no exception. Drinks were flowing, the food was delicious, and everyone appeared to be having a fantastic time. Then came the time my father stood up to make a toast. I expected it to be the usual. A few of jokes, a sincere thank you, and maybe a little something about how much he was looking forward to retirement. But then he made the announcement. I'm happy to say that after much thought and discussion, I'm ready to retire in a few months, and I've decided to pass the torch of CEO to someone who I think will take the company to new heights. My grandson, Aaron Miller. I sighed. I believed I had misheard him. Aaron is a grandson. The youngster is 25, has just graduated from business school, and has no real-world experience. And yet, he is the one taking over the firm to which I have committed more than a decade of my life. The clapping and congratulations around the room were like daggers. My heart was racing, and my stomach felt as if it was about to burst. I tried to seem calm, but inwardly, I was angry. Don't get me wrong, I don't detest Aaron. He's a nice enough kid when you talk to him at family gatherings, but he's young and inexperienced. He has absolutely no idea how to operate a corporation. And I can say this with confidence because I've been running it for several years. Aaron just has a fancy degree and my parents' mistaken confidence. I, on the other hand, had put years of blood, sweat and tears in this business, but it didn't seem to matter much. Everyone resumed socializing after the toast, but I couldn't keep up. My wife came over to check on me, and she must have thought I'd seen a ghost because she inquired what was wrong right away. I just shook my head and told her we'd discuss it later. I needed time to find out what the heck I was doing. Later that night, after the visitors had departed and the house was quiet, I faced my father alone. I was hoping he'd explain it was only a formality, or that I'd still be substantially involved, something to excuse this ridiculous decision. But instead, he doubled down. He informed me that Aaron was the best candidate because he was young, full of new ideas, and had a degree. A friggin' degree. Meanwhile, for more than a decade, I had been in charge of developing client connections, managing the staff, and overseeing day-to-day operations. He even had the nerve to add, you can still work with him, mentor him, show him the ropes. That was it for me. I told him right then that I couldn't remain. I couldn't imagine working for Aaron after everything I'd done for the firm. It wasn't even about the money or the championship at that stage. It was a principle. I had earned the post. I earned it. And being informed I wasn't even considered felt like a smack in the face. A brewer. The following several days were a haze. My parents attempted to talk me out of resigning, telling me I was overreacting and that I should think about the family, but I couldn't see it any other way. If they didn't regard my work enough to offer me the position I'd been striving for, I didn't see the sense in sticking. So I submitted my resignation, packed my office, and went away. Walking out of that workplace for the last time was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done. I had spent so many years there. I knew every inch of that area, both good and terrible. It wasn't just a job for me. It was part of my existence. Leaving was like severing a limb, but I knew I had to. Staying would have been much worse. My wife was wonderfully supportive during this. She said she respected my decision and was proud of me for advocating for myself. She understood how much this upset me, but she also realized I couldn't stay in an environment where I wasn't appreciated. That support meant everything to me since it seemed like the rest of my family was against me. My mother continued phoning, urging me to reconsider. My father even came up at my place unexpectedly one day to attempt to persuade me to come back, but every time they inquired, my response was the same. No, Ibru. The most difficult element of all of this was the sense of betrayal. My father and I used to be close, particularly when we initially began the firm. I gave up my own profession to assist him pursue his goal. And it seemed like he was tossing me away. And for what? Some believed Aaron was the future just because he had a degree. It did not make sense. After I departed, I did not hear from Aaron directly. I'm not sure if he wanted the post, or if he just agreed because my parents pushed. It didn't matter. The harm was done. My parents had made their decision, and now I had to make mine. The first several weeks after quitting were challenging. I kept repeating the talk with my father in my mind, wondering what I might have said or done better. But every time I arrived to the same conclusion, I made the correct decision. I could not have stayed and watched Aaron stumble his way through operating the company while I stood on the sidelines, biting my tongue. It wasn't only about me anymore. It was about my self-esteem. So, 4 months later, I'm still trying to stitch my life back together. I've been keeping my distance from my family while working out my future actions, and, as much as it hurts to admit it, I believe leaving away was the finest decision I could have made. If they couldn't perceive my worth, I had no reason to stay. After I resigned, I planned to leave the family company forever. I did not want to think about it, hear about it, or be reminded of its existence. But life does not operate that way. Especially when what you're attempting to forget is related to your family. Despite my best efforts, I continued hearing about the firm and Aaron's awful leadership. At start, it was minor stuff. My friend who still worked there texted me, "Dude, Aaron just fired 3 senior employees because they didn't vibe with his vision." My immediate reaction was to chuckle, not because it was amusing, but because it was so inevitable. Aaron had no idea what he was doing. Those staff had been with us since the beginning and were intimately familiar with the firm. Losing them was like to chopping off a limb and expecting to run a marathon. Next, I learned that he was making some significant modifications to our contracts. I'm all for innovation, but Aaron was jeopardizing long-standing agreements. Relationships I had painstakingly constructed and cultivated. Clients began to walk away, dissatisfied and puzzled. And yet, my parents stood by him. "He's just adjusting," my mother told a mutual acquaintance. "It's all part of the process." Okay, fine. The process of tanking a corporation. A Braftoft. Then came the real kicker. Financial fraud. I don't know all the facts since I don't want to go into them, but from what I can tell, Aaron tried to exaggerate our figures to impress a large customer. A rookie error. The individual probably thought he was being smart, but all he did was raise a large red flag that said, "Audit me." The consequences were swift and severe. The company's reputation was ruined. Clients bailed huge mass and lawsuits began to pile up. Hearing about all of this seemed like watching a train accident in slow motion. On the one hand, I felt justified. I mean, I warned my parents that Aaron was unprepared for the position, but they didn't listen. On the other hand, it was difficult to witness something I had worked so hard to develop fall apart in such a short period of time. I didn't want to care, but I couldn't avoid it. That firm has been my life for 9 years. It was like witnessing someone smash a sledgehammer into a house you created with your own 2 hands. But here's the deal. Nothing in this shocked me. Aaron was never ready to lead. He grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth. I never had to battle for anything. He had an arrogance about him, as if he believed he could go into a room and sort things out as he went. That may work in classroom, but not in the real world. Business is not forgiving. It does not care about your last name or GPA. Aaron was learning the hard way. I, Bree, was not the only one who saw it coming. I started receiving calls and texts from old co-workers, people I hadn't spoken with in months. "Man, we miss you around here," one person said. "It's a shambles without you." Another said, "The place feels like a sinking ship. I don't know how much longer I can stay here." It was flattering, but also heartbreaking. These were folks I'd been working with for years, people who trusted and supported me. Hearing their plight made me want to help, but I knew better than to become involved. I was not about to go in and clean up Aaron's mess. That wasn't my job anymore. What really got me was how my parents handled everything. Instead of holding Aaron responsible, they created excuses for him. "He's under a lot of pressure," my mother remarked when questioned about the fraud allegations. "He simply needs time to regain his feet." Time? The guy had almost destroyed the firm in less than 4 months. How much more time did he need? And don't forget about my sister. She was Aaron's strongest supporter throughout it all, acting as if he was some kind of misunderstood genius. I'm not sure if she was truly crazy or simply too proud to acknowledge she had made a mistake. Whatever the case, it was irritating. She'd campaigned for Aaron to be CEO, persuaded my parents it was the appropriate choice, and now she was doubling down on her stupid judgment. I avoided it for the most part, but one day I couldn't resist. I ran into an old family acquaintance at the grocery store, and they casually commented on how wonderful it must be to see the next generation take over the business. I just smiled and remarked, "Exciting isn't the word I'd use." They laughed, but I was not joking. In some strange sense, witnessing the firm crumble was cathartic. It seemed like all of my irritation and fury at being passed over for Aaron had been vindicated. I was not insane. I was not overreacting. They had made a tremendous mistake, and they were now facing the consequences. However, I did not take pleasure in their failure. I had moved on, or at least tried to. I'd begun to ponder ideas for my own business, something I could start from scratch without the help of others. My wife was really supportive, urging me to take the initiative and accomplish something for myself. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt in charge of my own future. Meanwhile, my folks were scurrying. Mutual acquaintances informed me that they were working to mitigate the damage and recover client trust. Good luck with it. Once trust has been shattered, it is very tough to regain, particularly in business. And with litigation stacking up, they had more pressing issues to deal with. A Bruin. I had no idea how Aaron was managing things. I hadn't talked to him since I quit, and I honestly didn't want to. But, based on what I heard, he was in over his head. Some said he was still attempting to appear in control, while others thought he was on the point of a collapse. Either way, it wasn't my fault, babe. After 4 months, the corporation was a mere shell of its former self. Clients were gone. Employees were departing in droves, leaving my parents desperate. They hadn't contacted me yet, but I knew it was just a matter of time. And when they did, I knew exactly what I was going to say. 4 months after I left the family company, the unavoidable happened. I'd prepared myself for it, but seeing my parents standing on my porch hit me like a rush of confused emotions. They were older and more agitated than I had ever seen them. My father had an unpleasant rigidity about him, as if he didn't want to be there but knew he couldn't go. My mother, on the other hand, said volumes with her look. Desperation. A burr key. I did not welcome them in immediately away. Honestly, I wanted to shut the door in their faces, but I didn't. "Can we come in?" my father said, his tone uncertain. I stood aside without saying anything, and they shuffled in. The tension in the room was immediate. My wife, who had been in the kitchen, looked at me but did not say anything. She was also expecting this moment. She gently disappeared upstairs, leaving me to cope with the situation. A bros. I sat across from them with arms folded, ready for them to begin. My mom usually jumped in first. "We need your support," she replied, her voice trembling. "The business is..." She stopped, as if speaking it out might make things worse. "It's in trouble. Aaron made some serious mistakes." I didn't answer. I merely gazed at her, letting the stillness linger. It was evident she wanted me to fill the void by stepping in and providing a solution. I did not. Eventually, my father spoke out. "He's in over his head," he confessed, scratching his temple as if he had a headache. "And now the company is facing lawsuits, losing clients, and we're barely hanging on." This was a moment I reflected on many times since I departed. I pictured people coming to me and begging me to mend something, and me laughing in their faces. But now that it was occurring, I was more annoyed than anything. It was neither fulfilling nor validating. It was simply sad. "Ebru, what are you expecting me to do about this?" I eventually asked. My tone was not hostile, but it was not pleasant either. I wanted them to wriggle a bit. They earned it. My mother reached out, laying her hand on mine. "You know the business better than anyone," she told me. "We need you to come back, please." Abba responded. Her remarks impacted me more than I had anticipated for years. All I wanted was for them to see my worth. To acknowledge that I was the one keeping the firm viable. And now they're virtually asking me to save them. However, it didn't feel like a triumph. It seemed like an insult. Despite this, they still expected me to clean up their mess. "Why don't you ask Aaron?" I said, moving my hand away. "He's the CEO, right? Let him fix it." "Ebru can't handle it," my father remarked, annoyance seeping into his voice. "We made a mistake. We see that now. But this is bigger than him. It's about the company, about everything we've built." Everything I've built," I clarified. "I'm the one who spent 9 years making that company what it is, and you threw me aside like I was nothing." My father groaned deeply, reclining back in his chair. He looked exhausted and discouraged. "We thought we were doing the right thing," he joked. "We thought Aaron would bring something new to the table. But you were right. He wasn't ready. And now we're paying the price." It should have made me happy to hear him say that, but it did not. It only made me angry. They knew Aaron wasn't prepared. I had informed them repeatedly, but they had not listened. And now they expected me to pick up the pieces. "I'm sorry," my mother replied quietly, tears welling in her eyes. "We were wrong. We should have trusted you. But it's not too late. You can still fix this. A BR rose up and paced the room. You want me to fix it? I said, my voice rising. You think I can just walk back in there and magically make everything better? Do you even hear yourselves? You didn't trust me before, but now that you're desperate, I'm suddenly good enough. They said nothing, and the quiet just increased my rage. Do you even understand what you're asking? You're asking me to put my life on hold again. To bail you out of a situation you created. And for what? So you can pat me on the back and tell me good job, kid, before throwing me under the bus again. That's not what this is, my father stated firmly. This is about saving the company, saving our legacy. Nay hey bro, not mine, not anymore. Ibarui responded. My mother then began crying, sobbing into her hands. My father merely sat there, gazing at the floor, as if he had no idea what to do. For a moment, I felt guilty. They were my parents after all. But then I recalled the humiliation, the treachery, and the endless evenings I'd spent working late while they were away congratulating Aaron on his high grades. That enraged me more than their tears could ever soothe. Abra, I can't help you, I eventually answered, my voice firm. I won't. I've already begun working on my own plans. I'm now constructing something for myself, and I'm not going to throw it away to clean up your mess. My father looked up, his expression darkening. So that's it. You're just going to turn your back on your family? I laughed bitterly. You turned your back on me first. Don't try to guilt me into this. It won't work. They departed shortly after that. My mother was still sniffling, and my father appeared to want to dispute but lacked the energy. I let out a trembling breath as the door closed behind them. My wife came downstairs and wrapped her arms around me. You did the right thing, she said. You don't owe them anything. Abra, she was correct. Of course I knew this, but it still stung. Walking away from the firm had been difficult enough. Walking away from my folks seemed much more difficult. But I could not go back, not now, not ever. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected about what they had said about salvaging the firm and correcting things. A part of me wanted to, not for them, but for myself, for the individuals I'd worked with and the clients who had put their faith in me. But another part of me realized it wasn't my duty anymore. They had made their decision, and they now had to live with it. That night I fell asleep more determined than ever that I was not going back. It was time to go forth. After my parents arrived at my door, I had a peculiar feeling of clarity. For the first time in months, I stopped looking back. I'd spent too much time stewing over what had happened, reliving the betrayal, disappointment, and rage. But after closing the door on them, metaphorically and practically, I understood it was time to concentrate on what was ahead. If I wasn't going back to their firm, I needed to create something on my own. Starting from scratch is intimidating, even if you know what you're doing. I did not have a large office or a fancy crew. Hell, I didn't even have a solid plan at start. All I had were the skills and knowledge I'd gained over the previous 9 years, as well as the drive to show to myself, and, perhaps to them, that I could do it. The first stage was deciding what sort of business I wanted to start. That was all I understood about real estate, so it was an easy decision. But I didn't only want to replicate my father's firm. I wanted to do something different and better. I'd learned a lot over the years, not just about the business, but also about how to treat people, clients, workers, and others. My parents had always run the firm like a machine, churning out transactions with little consideration for the people behind them. I wanted to create something more personalized, more human. I began by contacting a handful of my former clients, whom I had worked with for years and who trusted me. I stated that I was beginning my own business and asked if they would like to work with me again. To my astonishment and relief, the most of them were enthusiastic. We were wondering when you'd get back in the game, one of them added. Aaron's been a disaster. We've been waiting for someone to step up. Their replies gave me the confidence I needed. If they believed in me, I might be able to pull this off. But getting clients on board was only one part of the puzzle. I also required a team. The corporation was not going to run itself. That's where my former coworkers came in. I stayed in touch with a couple of them after I left, and I knew some were dissatisfied with how things were going under Aaron's leadership. I started making calls one at a time. Hey, I'm putting something together, I informed them. It's small right now, but I think it has potential. Are you interested? The comments were overwhelmingly enthusiastic. Many of them had already left my father's firm, tired of the chaos and incompetence. I'm in, one of them announced instantly. I've been waiting for this call. Within a few weeks I had assembled a small but capable staff. We didn't have a beautiful office or flashy equipment, just a shared workstation and a lot of passion. It seemed like the early days of my father's business, when we were scrappy and hungry. Except this time, it was my vision and regulations. Setting up the business was a frenzy. Between registering the firm, creating a website, and finding out how to sell ourselves, I hardly had time to breathe. But it was exciting. Every minor triumph, such as a customer signing on or a lead turning into a sale, seemed like a huge accomplishment. For the first time in years, I wasn't simply working. I was producing something, which felt amazing. Of course, not everything went smoothly. I had moments of uncertainty, when I wondered whether I was taking on too much. The burden of handling funds, logistics, and customer relationships was exhausting at times. But every time I thought about quitting up, I reminded myself why I was doing it. I wasn't simply establishing a business, I was demonstrating to myself that I was capable. One of the most difficult problems was finding a balance between job and personal life. My wife was really supportive, but I knew it was not easy for her. She worked full-time while I focused all of my efforts on the business, frequently working late into the night. "You're going to burn out if you keep this up," she cautioned me one night as I sat slumped over my laptop examining contracts. "I know," I said, scratching my temples. "But if I don't push now, it'll never take off." She did not protest, but I could sense concern in her eyes. It was a reminder that, although growing the business was vital, so was preserving the life we'd created together. I made a mental note to find a better balance, although I wasn't sure how yet. Things gradually fell into place over the course of many weeks. Our first several trades went easily, and client reaction was extraordinarily favorable. "This feels like the old days," one of them said, recalling times when things were simpler and more intimate. "I miss this." Hearing those words felt like confirmation. I was doing things correctly. The business began to expand. Not spectacular development, but gradual. And it was plenty for me. Meanwhile, I couldn't ignore the rumors surrounding my father's firm. The word on the street was that things were only getting worse. They were losing business at a rapid pace, and lawsuits were stacking up. It was difficult not to feel a sense of delight. After all, I had warned them. But ultimately I felt sad for the staff and clients who got caught in the crossfire. They deserved better. What shocked me was how many of those clients and staff approached me. It wasn't something I actively sought, at least not first. But news spread that I was beginning my own business, and others approached out. "If you're looking for more staff, let me know," one former coworker stated. "I can't stand it here anymore." Another customer texted me, "We've always trusted you. Let's talk." I wasn't poaching. They were heading at me. And honestly, it felt great. These were folks that saw my value and wanted to work with me because of what I brought to the table. It was in sharp contrast to how my family had handled me. By the end of the second month, we had outgrown our shared workplace and were looking for a real office. It was a minor accomplishment, but it felt big. Standing in that vacant area, considering all the possibilities, I couldn't help but grin. This was mine. All of it. Nobody could take it away from me. I wasn't simply surviving. I was prospering. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely free. Things with my family had gotten out of hand by the time I'd gotten used to my new business. The word has spread about what I was doing. Clients switched to me, workers expressed interest in joining my team, and the word quickly reached my parents and sister. I hadn't spoken to any of them since their visit to my house, and I didn't intend to, but they were clearly not done with me. It began with emails. My father sent a couple variants of the same message. He wanted to chat and figure things out. I disregarded them. Then my mother began phoning. First once a week, then every few days. I never picked up. She eventually left a voicemail, which made my fury boil. "I hope you're happy," she murmured, her voice shaking with barely suppressed wrath. "You're tearing this family apart. I don't know how you can live with yourself." I erased the mail without responding. What was there to say? They'd made their bed. Now they had to lay in it. I was not accountable for their mess, no matter how much they attempted to blame me. However, when my sister became involved, things really heated up. Unlike my parents, who were still attempting to shame me into returning, she went straight for the jugular. I unexpectedly received a letter from a lawyer. I initially believed it was an error, but as I went through it, my stomach plummeted. They accused me of stealing customers and personnel. According to the letter, I purposefully harmed their business by poaching important accounts and employees. They said I was breaching some type of unwritten family pact and asked that I stop all operations immediately. If I didn't comply, they threatened to take legal action. Bree couldn't help but giggle when reading that. It was so absurd and petty. When I worked there, my contract did not have a non-compete provision. I checked twice. They had no legal standing. However, the fact that they had resorted to this strategy revealed all I needed to know about their desperation. Rather than answer immediately, I submitted the letter to my lawyer. "Handle it," I instructed him. "I don't have time for this nonsense," he said, assuring me that the threat was empty and not to worry. Still, the entire experience left a terrible taste in my mouth. A few days later, my parents arrived at my office unexpectedly. It was their first time seeing the new area, and I could tell they weren't pleased. My mother glanced around with a barely veiled disgust, while my father's expression was a mix of fury and defeat. "Do you really think this is going to work?" my father questioned, nodding toward the office. "You're playing a dangerous game." I relaxed back in my chair, unconcerned. "It's already working," I explained simply. "And it's not a game." My mother's cheeks reddened with wrath. "You're ruining everything," she said. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family, to us, Ibra?" I stood up and spoke calmly but firmly. "What I'm doing," you said, "is building something for myself. Something you didn't think I was capable of. If that bothers you, that's your problem, not mine." Aburi, they didn't remain long after that. I believe they recognized there was no use in attempting to guilt me anymore. However, their visit left me disturbed. Not because of what they said, but because it verified what I had believed for a long time. They weren't just unhappy about losing the business. They were angry about losing control of me. For years I had been the dependable one, the one they could rely on to keep things moving smoothly. I'd given up so much of my own life to help them achieve their ambition, and now that I was gone, they weren't sure what to do. It was not about the customers or the money. It was about power dynamics, and they were furious that I had taken it back. Meanwhile, conditions at my father's firm were getting progressively worse. Employees were departing in droves and their reputation was shattered. Aaron, I heard, was hardly showing up for work anymore. Someone informed me he was seen at a pub in the middle of the day, appearing absolutely out of place. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I couldn't stop thinking about how all of this might have been prevented if my parents had made a different decision. The litigation remained ongoing, and from what I could see, the company's legal team was trying to keep up. I did not envy them. Trying to clean up Aaron's mess was like trying to extinguish a forest fire with a garden hose. It was only a matter of time before the entire structure collapsed. Throughout it all, I maintained my focus on my own business. We were steadily increasing and extending our personnel. I engaged a tiny marketing business to assist us spread the word, which paid off almost immediately. The queries began to come in, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. One night, when I was analyzing our finances, my wife entered the room with a glass of ginger ale. "You know," she remarked, sitting next to me, "I don't think I've ever seen you this happy, ever." I smiled and laid the papers aside. "It feels good," I confessed. "Building something for myself, not answering to anyone else, a broofy." She placed her head against my shoulder. "You deserve it." Her comments stuck with me long after she'd gone to bed. For so long, I had been striving for someone else's favor. In some ways, my parents, relatives, and Aaron are all involved. But now I was actually doing something for myself. And for the first time, I didn't care what others thought. As I sat there, surrounded by the fruits of my labor, I understood something vital. This wasn't simply about proving my parents incorrect or outperforming Aaron. It was about demonstrating to myself that I was capable of more and didn't require their approval to achieve. And in that instant, I knew I had made the proper decision. Abrafi, allow them to submit their letters. Allow them to make their threats. I was not going back. Not now. Not ever. Months after my parents' impromptu visit to my office and my sister's ridiculous legal threats at an unexpected location. Contentment. My new business was doing nicely. Not completely, but enough to keep me occupied and positive. My wife had even mentioned reducing her own work to join me full-time, and the prospect of establishing something together made it all feel even more significant. Still, elements of my previous existence persisted in the background. My parents were not the kind to just let things go, and even though I had blocked the most of their attempts to reach me, information about the family company or Aaron would occasionally spread among common acquaintances, and the news was rarely positive. Brookie Aaron, it seems, had finally snapped under strain. The litigation had exhausted the company's finances, and the loss of important clients meant that income was almost non-existent. My father was obliged to dispose certain assets to keep the doors open. But even this wasn't enough. A handful of old co-workers who just joined me noted that the workplace was nearly empty. Employees who stayed were motivated by desperation rather than loyalty. One day, I received a call from an old client who had stayed with my father's firm longer than others. "Your parents sold the building," he explained. "I thought you'd want to know." This caught me off surprise. Selling the office. Since its inception, that building had served as the company's headquarters. It wasn't just a workstation. It was a representation of everything we had accomplished together. It was weird to hear that it was gone. Not necessarily melancholy, but as if another piece of the past had crumbled away. "Thank you for informing me," I informed him. "But I'm not involved with them anymore." He answered, "Abaru, I figured as much. Just thought you'd want to hear from someone who's still rooting for you." Hey Burke. I appreciate it. It reminded me that not everyone had abandoned me amid this disaster. A few weeks later, I received another surprise. This time, it was not a phone call or mail. It was an email from my father. I almost erased it before reading it, but my curiosity won out. The subject line said, "An apology." I opened it and skimmed the first few lines, anticipating more excuses or requests for assistance. But, as I read on, I sensed something was different this time. He wasn't urging me to return or attempting to transfer the responsibility. He said he had made a mistake. "I thought I was doing what was best for the family," he said. "But I see now that I let my pride get in the way. I listened to your sister because I didn't want to admit I was wrong about Aaron. I see now that you were the one who deserved that position, and I'm sorry for not recognizing it sooner." The email continued on for many paragraphs, recalling events from my history that I'd long ago forgotten. He mentioned how much he had relied on me in the early years. How did he know the firm would not have survived without my contributions? Reading it seemed weird. Part of me had been waiting years to hear these words, but now that they were here, I wasn't sure how to react. Towards the conclusion, he said something that stuck with me. "I know I can't change what has happened," he wrote, "but I hope someday you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." Hello dude. I closed the email without responding. Forgiveness was a tough issue. I wasn't furious any longer. Not really. But I wasn't prepared to let them back into my life either. It seemed like they were still attempting to draw me back into the past, and I'd fought too hard to put it behind. Meanwhile, my business continued to expand. We relocated into a larger office location and hired a couple new people. Some of the clients who had remained faithful to my father's firm later contacted me, seeking to work with me instead. I was skeptical at first, but after a few chats, I understood they weren't simply searching for a bargain. They were searching for stability. I gave them that, and in return, they trusted me. Aaron, last I heard, was living with my sister again. Although the claims were settled, the financial harm had already been done. He was supposedly seeking to find himself, although what that meant was unclear. I didn't wish him ill, nor did I feel sorry for him. He had been given an opportunity he was not prepared for, and he had squandered it. That was not my problem. My sister, understandably, was not handling the aftermath well. According to what I've heard from common acquaintances, she was bitter and resentful, blaming everyone but herself for what happened. My parents had ceased openly supporting her, so I knew all I needed to know. They were now seeing her for who she truly was, not the intelligent daughter they had always believed in, but someone who was capable of looking out for herself and no one else. One day, while sitting in my office and gazing out at the metropolitan skyline, I realized I felt free. Truly free. The weight of my family's expectations, disappointment, and manipulation was gone. For so long, I defined myself based on what others thought of me and what I could do to gain their acceptance. But suddenly, none of that mattered. I didn't start my business to prove a point or to defy them. I was doing it for myself, my wife, and those who believed in me. And it was enough. I'm not sure whether I'll ever totally reconcile with my family. Perhaps someday, after the dust has settled, we will be able to repair the broken parts. Perhaps we won't. Either way, I'm okay with it. For the time being, my attention is on the future. And for the first time in years, it seems like it belongs to me.